Assalamu alaikum and good greetings. So today we'll be watching a video titled The Death of Judas, Bible Contradiction number 19. Without further ado, let's watch.
Supposed Bible contradiction. How did Judas die? Matthew 27 says Judas died by hanging. However,
So he departed and he went and hanged himself, okay?
Acts, Luke records he fell headlong and burst asunder, causing his bowels to gush out.
So here, acquired a fear or reward, wickedness, and falling headlong. He burst open in the middle and all his bowel gushed out. Okay, so one he hang himself and one he fall and he burst open. All right.
So how can this be addressed? Well, I think skeptics are jumping the gun on this one. This one can easily be addressed by noting that Matthew is telling us how Judas died, and Luke is telling us the effects of Judas's body after his death. Matthew tells us Judas went out and hanged,
Meaning that he is not he didn't die because he fall, but he fall after he had died. Is that what he mean?
himself. But this happened on Friday when Jesus died, just before the Sabbath, when no one would have bothered to cut him down. The Jews also had taboos about touching dead bodies, so it is likely no one would have wanted to go near a hanging body, especially the body of a traitor. When rotting bodies are left alone, the internal bacteria begins to break down tissues, which in turn causes gases to swell up in the body. Pressure builds up and can cause the body to burst open, which is likely what happened to Judas's body. If his body was left alone for
Probably, yeah.
days to decompose, when
I mean, he said probably. So this is among the theory to be able to, make sense of what appeared to be contradiction, right?
someone finally cut the rope or the branch snapped, the force
So if the possibility of someone cut the rope or the branch, fall down, would he be falling headlong though? Right, he will be falling like that, right? Not unless someone cut and push him or something. That's weird. Interesting theory, but I still cannot see how that makes sense.
His body was left alone for days to decompose. When someone finally cut the rope or the branch snapped, the force of hitting the ground could have caused the body to burst open.
Yeah, he said himself, force when it hit the ground. You have to justify something else, because I think he's trying to justify what's the word? He burst open in the middle, right? Fall like this, he burst open in the middle. Okay, but still falling headlong needs to be, you have to search for other possibility though. If you want, my bigger problem is if this is the way of justification, meaning that when we read something in the Bible, you cannot really assume it is like chronological, right? Meaning that if you read here and then you read here, you cannot simply assume it should be understood as normal people writing, because it might be eliminating crucial point to understand, but you just suddenly say about the corpse, the dead body, without saying it's dead body. But so it's interesting if you want to see the book as such, because then any other stories that you read, it can be as such as well, right? No, it doesn't necessarily mean that it continues like that. Maybe some important plot in the middle, but it's just being silent for whatever reason. And then here, it is not. It may be understood totally different way, something like this. Right? So, to me, at least until now, the justification is quite a stretch.
Cut the rope or the branch snapped, the force of hitting the ground could have caused the body to burst open. As one medical textbook puts it, between 3 and 7 days, ever-increasing pressure of the putrefying gases associated with colliquative changes in the soft tissues may lead to softening of the abdominal parietes, resulting in bursting open of the abdomen and thorax. John Polhill also notes there is some early evidence the original reading may have become swollen instead of falling headlong. The phrases are similar in Greek, and it could have been a scribal error.
Okay, so that's another thing, scribal error. I think scribal error is quite commonly used to justify things in the Bible, right? Meaning, I'm not sure how to say it, how common it is, but this is not the first time I've heard about, not the first issue where the justification is it may be scribal error. I mean, maybe the original says something else, but what is left with us is something else. I know the Christian, because they don't see the Bible as the word of God, so scribal error, many of the things that we have now may not be the original word entirely. It's not really an issue, because to begin with, it's word of man inspired by God, not the word of God himself. And second, as long as the core message, still understood to be the same, so even though the rest, what we have may be having scribal error and it's deviated so much, it is still not that big of an issue, right? That's how I understand how Christians sees the Bible.
So the accounts can be demonstrated to cohere nicely, and it matches modern medical descriptions of a decomposing body. Matthew can be
so for here
nicely, and it matches modern medical descriptions of a decomposing body.
So, because my question is about falling headlong, right? How does you fall headlong? So he says, okay, it is actually not falling headlong. Perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's swell. And in that case, it's not falling, right? It's swell, and then suddenly he bursts in the middle, and his bowel gush out. If that is the case, not because falling, because it's swollen while still hanging, I guess. So either which way, I think for Christian, as long as they can, resolve this issue, it's okay for them. From a Muslim, the narrative is different, right? Meaning that if this is the state of the Bible, then is it a book that I can rely on for my salvation? Because it is so open to this kind of, scribal error. Perhaps it means something else, etc., etc. Right? So that's why it is very difficult for me to see how people can rely on this book for something so important, when you cannot even say for sure this means this, because it may be meaning that some important episode is taken out or silent about, etc. Right?
Matthew can be seen as recording how Judas died, and Luke records what happened to the body after his death. Another theory that has been proposed is that Matthew is not being literal, but is describing Judas's death in terms of the traitor Ahithophel from 2 Samuel 17. Audrey Conrad notes that Matthew's use of the words "for departed" and "hanged himself" occur in 2 Samuel 17:23. Plus, John's Gospel also compares Judas to Ahithophel. So Matthew is essentially telling us that Judas went out and became another Ahithophel, and hanging himself would just be terminology to denote he died the death worthy of a traitor. It would be sort of like today if I said someone bit the dust. It is a cultural expression to denote someone died.
So in that case, those who take this as the solution, he never hanged himself, but then what? But then he actually fall headlong in the field, and the gut bust open, and that one is just to say that he died in a certain like someone, is it?
Not that someone literally bit dust. Matthew might be doing a similar thing with the phrase "went out and hanged himself." It's possible the culture of that day would have understood this as a way to say he died the death of a traitor, like Ahithophel. Craig Keener says, the hanging may well recall the story of Ahithophel's end after his betrayal of David, which fits some other David-Jesus parallels in the pre-Matthean Passion tradition. Judas presumably died without atonement, and the narrative underlines that he received his just due. Either of these solutions are fine, but even if Matthew is being literal and alluding to Ahithophel at the same time, the accounts still cohere nicely. The next issue is Matthew says the priest purchased a field, but Luke says Judas acquired it. So some skeptics suggest there is a contradiction in who purchased the field, but this isn't actually true. Matthew and Luke use two different Greek words here. Matthew uses a word that refers to making a business transaction, whereas Luke uses a word to refer to acquiring something, which can refer to purchasing but doesn't have to. So in other words, Matthew notes the priest bought the field, but Luke tells us that it belonged to Judas. so the priest would have bought it in Judas's name. This can be seen in Matthew, where the priest refused to put the money back into the treasury because it came from betraying innocent blood. Ancient societies, especially Jewish societies, had ritual purity laws against accepting money that was used for immoral purposes. So it makes sense that when the priest purchased the field, they would do it in Judas's name, hence Judas acquired the field of blood. This avoids a paper transaction showing the priest bought something with blood money, avoiding a ritual purity issue for the public to see. Luke, of course, would report what a later writer would have seen from the records, whereas Matthew writes as one who was an eyewitness, having first-hand knowledge of how the purchasing of the field went down. So in reality, the accounts cohere nicely. Thus, this supposed contradiction can be resolved.
Interesting story, I guess. Yeah, I guess my question is, which of the explanation that, if you are Christian, which explanation you hold on to, or you think irrelevant, meaning whichever, as long as it can be resolved anyway, is fine by me, right? So I'm interested to know that. Of course, from my point of view, you know already, right? Meaning that I've mentioned that you have to simultaneously stretch several things simultaneously to make that make sense. But anyway, so at least I have heard of how, I'm not sure if there's other theory to resolve this contradiction, but how this is seen, because I've never heard anyone explain like this when, because to be fair, most Christians would never actually look into this anyway to begin with, right? They would never had known for the supposedly contradiction to begin with, hence they never seek for the answer. Hence, in most of the videos that I watch, most Christians are unaware of these two verses of that same man, and then their reply is always, different writer or different author or different people look at the same event from different perspectives. But that doesn't even resolve the issue, because how can you see him fall here and hanging himself here, right? So this is at least not as much, not just that it doesn't come across as simply justify at all cost kind of approach, right? Yeah, what do you think? Feel free to comment. Thank you for watching. See you next time.